Hi, I'm Samson Davina, and this is my wife Heather Davina. And today we're going to be demonstrating part 2 of spin using a bicycle wheel. And today we're going to be talking about friction. So as we talked about in the first video, when Heather puts topspin on the ball, go ahead and spin it, and then I hit topspin on the ball. In order to continue topspin, we're actually changing the rotation. Go ahead, Heather. We're actually changing the rotation going back and forth. Okay, so Heather gives topspin, I give topspin. Heather gives topspin, I give topspin. So as you can see, the wheel is changing this way and then this way to maintain the topspin. And the reason it's easy to maintain the topspin is because the friction. The ball bites into your rubber and it makes it easy to create topspin. Same thing with backspin. If Heather gives me backspin and I give her backspin back, it's easy to maintain because the ball bites into the rubber. The difficulty, and this is what we're going to be talking about today, is when you go from backspin to topspin or topspin to backspin. So Heather, go ahead and chop down on the wheel as if you're giving me a backspin ball. Go ahead. Alright, so now I want to change it to topspin. If I just lightly touch it, I don't get any friction, what do you think is going to happen? Of course the ball is going to go down. So if Heather and I are playing a game and she chops down on the ball with a lot of backspin and I just touch it gently, I don't get the friction, the ball goes down, my loop goes down into the floor. Do that again. Chop down into it. So if I just chop a little harder. If I just barely touch it, like I'm going to try to topspin it, I don't get any friction at all. So the way you're going to produce what's called a loop is when you're changing the ball from backspin to topspin, is that you have to swing harder than they swung in order to get that friction. So go ahead and give me a light backspin. Okay. In order for me to get friction, I have to swing harder or possibly even open my angle up. But against a normal shot, if I keep my angle fairly close, that ball's always going to go down. So in order to produce enough spin, I've got to be able to swing harder to get that friction going. The same principle when Heather gives me a topspin ball. If Heather gives me a topspin ball and I just lightly chop it, that ball's going to be going flying up. In order for me to be able to chop it, I've got to really be able to generate the friction. Go ahead and give me a topspin ball, Heather. So she gives me a topspin ball, and I just lightly touch it, no friction again. Okay? So if she gives me topspin, in order for me to be able to chop it, I've got to be able to add friction to it. So the main principle that I want you to understand today is that when she gives me topspin and I give her topspin, there's friction, so it's easy to control the ball. Anytime I'm changing it, let's say she gives me backspin and I want to produce topspin, I've got to be able to swing harder to get that friction. Once I have friction, it's much easier to control the ball. But without friction, you lose total control.